How are you?
Tony, this is Terry Gasterland. I'm here today for Delmar.
All right, very good. Thanks, Terry.
Good.
Hopefully we've got Anthony gonna get us all going here. How we doing, Anthony?
Desmond's here.
Desmond's here. That's good. That means we're getting pretty damn close to a quorum. We need to get Houston on the line here.
Tony, can you hear me? It's Sharon.
I can, Sharon. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
We're having some challenges reaching the bunker.
The room looks empty there.
Yes, it does. The word is that they are working on it. So as soon as we get that technical difficulty straightened out, we will call the meeting to order, and I appreciate your patience.
Eric Grant, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but that was not acceptable. Are you
We're
now?
dialed in. All right.
Looks like we have a quorum, so are we ready to get started?
Yes, sir.
All right, then, I would like to call to order the regular board meeting of the North County Transit District for October 21, 2021. Before I begin, I would like to inform members of the public who may be viewing the meeting on the district's YouTube page that in order to make a public comment during the meeting, you must connect to the meeting using the Zoom link provided on the agenda. You must also register with the clerk by sending an email with a name and/or phone number and which item you would like to speak on. I would like to ask Anthony Flores, the clerk of the board, to call the roll.
Yes, sir. Board Member Sanchez. Board Chair Krantz.
Here.
Board Member Contreras.
Present.
Board Member McNamara.
Here.
Board Member Desmond.
Here.
Board Alternate Castleman.
Here.
Board Vice Chair Edson.
Present.
Board Member Jenkins.
Here.
Board Member Papatal.
Here.
And Board Member Von Loper.
Present.
That concludes the roll, sir.
All right, thank you. So if you would all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Anthony will now provide a safety briefing and review evacuation procedures.
Yes, sir. For those here in the building, in the event of an emergency, I'll dial 911. In the event of an evacuation, please exit the building using the stairs. Do not use the elevators. Once clear of the building, please do not re-enter unless told to do so by emergency personnel. We have fire alarms and fire extinguishers located on each floor of this building. We also have a portable defibrillator located on the first floor and staff on hand trained on CPR procedures. That concludes my safety brief, sir.
Thank you. Are there any public comments today?
We do have public comments, received 7 written public comments, sir. Those were provided to the board. 6 were in regard to agenda item 26. 1 was general public comment, not specific to any agenda item. There was also a PowerPoint that will go along with a public speaker for agenda item 26 and 2 voicemails that will play for agenda item 26 when we get to that item.
Okay, and I forgot to ask, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, sir.
All right, so are we gonna hear the telephonic comments now, or did you say there were no for general communication?
We will listen to those when we get to agenda item 26, sir.
Okay. So before we get to specific items on the agenda for this meeting, I want to outline the protocols. First, please hold your comments and or questions till after the agenda item has been presented. Second, when the time comes for board member comments, please use the raise hand function and I will call on you in the order received. So that takes us to items A and B, minutes for the regular board meeting of September 16, 2021, and special board meeting of September 30, and consent items 1 through 22. Of the 22 consent items, I will be abstaining from voting on agenda item number 16 as it relates to an item where I've already acted on behalf of the city of Encinitas. Anthony, we will need to break up the consent agenda items into 2 votes. The first will be a combined motion to approve the minutes for the regular board meetings of September 16, 2021, and the special board meeting of September 30, 2021, and consent items 1 through 15 and 17 through 20. and then a second and separate vote for the consent item number 16. May I have a motion may I have a combined motion to approve the minutes for the regular board meeting of September 16, 2021 and special board meeting of September 30, 2021 and consent items 1 through 15 and 17 through 22.
So move.
Jenkins will move to approve.
All right, I think that was Board Member Jenkins and
Yes.
Board Member Vice Chair Edson that were motion and second.
On the combined motion of Board Member Sharon Jenkins, seconded by Board Vice Chair Joel Edson, to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting held on September 16, 2021, the special board meeting held on September 30th, 2021, and consent items 1 through 15 and 17 through 22. Board Member Papatal, how do you vote?
Anthony, I'm going to vote aye for everything except for the regular board meeting. I'll abstain the special board meeting. I'll abstain since I didn't attend. Councilmember Acosta did on my behalf. If we can just note that in the record. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to also note that Terry Gasterlin will be abstaining from the minutes of the meeting since I did not attend this.
Board Chair Krantz?
Yes.
Board Member McNamara?
Aye.
Board Member Sanchez? Board Member Desmond?
Yes. Aye.
Board Member Jenkins?
Yes. I think Tony's a yes on this motion.
Yes, ma'am. Redo it. Yeah.
Board Chair Krantz, this is Lori Winfrey. I am looking at the abstentions for the approval of the minutes. I think we need to break out the vote on this item so that it's clear who's abstaining from the regular board meeting minutes of September 16, 2021. So I think we're going to need 3 motions rather than the combined motion.
All right, so Vice Chair Edson and Board Member Jenkins, we need to have you withdraw and or modify your motion. And we'll start with the regular meeting minutes.
Okay, so I'll modify my motion. I think what we need to modify it to is to approve the September 16th minutes. Is that correct, Lori, with the consent items except for 16?
Yes, so I think you can actually have 2 different motions. One would be just to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting September 16, 2021,
Okay.
because I think we have 2 abstentions that I heard on that one. And then you could have a combined motion for the special board meeting minutes of September 30th, 2021, and consent items 1 through 15 and 17 through 22.
Okay, so I'll amend my motion to approve the September 16th board meeting minutes.
Second.
Okay, do we have a second?
Yes, this is Edson. It's my second stance.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. On the motion of Board Member Sharon Jenkins, seconded by Board Vice Chair Joel Edson, to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting held on September 16th, 2021. Board Member Papatal, how do you vote?
Aye.
Board Alternate Gastelum?
Aye.
Board Chair Krantz?
Yes.
Board Member McNamara?
Yes.
Board Member Sanchez? Board Member Desmond?
Yes.
Board Member Jenkins?
Yes.
Board Vice Chair Edson?
Yes.
Board Member Contreras?
Aye.
Motion passes with all board members present voting yes, with the exception of Board Member Sanchez absent.
And it does seem like this needs to be the minutes for the special board meeting should be separate than the consent items as well, because this is where some of the people that are at this meeting did not attend.
Yes, let's do 3 motions.
Okay, so I'll motion to approve the special board meeting minutes for September 30th. Jenkins,
Second by Edson.
On the motion of Board Member Sharon Jenkins, seconded by Board Vice Chair Joel Essen, to approve the special board meeting minutes held on September 30th, 2021. Board Member Vapato, how do you vote?
Abstain?
Board Member Gastelum?
Abstain?
Board Chair Krantz?
Yes.
Board Member McNamara?
Yes.
Board Member Sanchez? Board Member Desmond?
Yes.
Board Member Jenkins?
yes.
Board Vice Chair Edson?
Yes.
Board Member Contreras?
Aye.
Motion passes with all board members present voting yes, with the exception of board members Vapato and Gastelum abstained. Board Member Sanchez absent.
Okay, thank you. So now entertaining a motion for the consent items 1 through 15 and 17 through 22.
Jenkins will motion.
Second, Desmond.
On the motion of Board Member Sharon Jenkins, seconded by Board Member Jim Desmond, to approve consent items 1 through 15 and 17 through 22. Board Member Vapato, how do you vote?
Aye.
Board Member Gastelum?
Aye.
Board Chair Krantz?
Aye.
Board Member McNamara?
Aye.
Board Member Sanchez? Board Member Desmond?
Aye.
Board Member Jenkins?
Aye.
Board Vice Chair Edson?
Aye.
Board Member Contreras?
Aye.
Motion passes with all board members present voting yes. Board Member Sanchez absent.
Okay, thank you. So that leaves consent item 16.
Jenkins will move to approve item 16.
And this is Bhat Patel, second.
On the motion of Board Member Sharon Jenkins, seconded by Board Member Priya Vapato, to approve it, consent item 16. Board Member Vapato, how do you vote?
Aye.
Board Member Gastelum?
Aye.
Board Chair Krantz?
Abstain.
Board Member McNamara?
Aye.
Board Member Sanchez? Board Member Desmond?
Aye.
Board Member Jenkins? Board Member Jenkins, I believe you're on mute. Board Vice Chair Edson?
Aye.
Board Member Contreras?
Aye.
Board Member Jenkins, are you there?
Looks like she may be,
Aye.
sounded like an aye to me.
Jenkins, aye.
On the motion of Board Member Sharon Jenkins, seconded by Board Member Priya Vapato, to approve agenda item 16, motion passes with all board members present voting yes, with the exception of Board Chair Krantz abstained. Board Member Sanchez absent.
Excellent. Thank you for your patience throughout that. We are now moving on to other business items, numbers 23, 24, and 25. Laura Cote, the Chief Administrative Officer, is going to handle review item number 23. And as a reminder, the board at its May 2021 meeting voted to support the insourcing of specified rail operations and maintenance, and also expressed support for adopting a new pension tier for employees hired after December 30, 2022. The action today represents a first step in implementing the new pension tier. And next month, staff will return to request for approval of the new pension tier. Laura will now review this agenda item.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members of the board. So as Chair Kranz has noted, this item is asking the board to take the next step regarding your direction from earlier this year to add a new pension tier for most employees that are hired after December 31st of 2021. At your meeting in April, the board heard about and approved the new business model for transitioning current contracted rail delivery and facilities maintenance services in-house. In May, you approved final budget for fiscal year 21, which included the first year's costs associated with this transition. There are two pension impacts of this business model change. The first relates to the coaster engineers and conductors that will be transitioning to Nctd, which represent approximately 30 employees. They will be remaining on their current railroad retirement system pension plan as they transition over to Nctd. The remaining employees who begin employment with the district and enter into the CalPERS plan under PEPRA, the Public Employees Pension Reform Act, will be placed in a new pension tier, which is 1.5% at age 65. I will note that when this item was brought to you in April, it was believed that a tier of 1.25% at age 67 was available to Nctd. However, after further discussions with CalPERS, it was determined that the 1.5% at age 65 is the tier applicable and available under PEPRA that gets us closest to that original request. Today's meeting is the first of two steps that are required by CalPERS to add a new pension tier. By adopting the resolution of intention today, the board hereby gives notice of intention to approve an amendment to the contract between Nctd and the Board of Administration of the Public Employees Retirement System, or CalPERS. We will then be back in November to request that the board approve the contract amendment as a final step in this process. We wanted to just offer a couple of bits of information related to net pension liability. What you'll see on this screen is Nctd's liability over the last several years. And we also wanted to offer a comparison across the county with respect to spending on county agencies for your reference. You'll note that North County Transit District is highlighted about future sales within this particular slide. So the recommendation before you today is to adopt the resolution number 21-06 regarding the intention to approve an amendment to Nctd's contract with California Public Employees Retirement System to add a retirement tier for all employees subject to the Public Employees Pension Reform Act that are hired after December 31st, 2021, changing the formula to 1.5% at age 65. So this concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Jenkins.
I just have one clarification. I see in the recommendation, it is December 31, 21, anybody hired after that date. I just want to clarify because I couldn't hear too well, but it sounded like in the beginning, somebody said December 31, 22, but just to be clear, it is 2021.
Yeah, so anyone who's going into the new pension tier would be hired after December 31st, 2021.
Perfect.
Hopefully that'll help.
Okay, thank you.
And Anthony, do we have any public comments on this agenda item?
We do not, sir.
All right. So with that, I would entertain a motion, seeing no other raised hands.
I move to accept staff's recommendation.
Second. By Edson.
Just want to confirm, Vice Chair Edson, you second the motion?
I did.
Thank you, ma'am. On the motion of Board Member Karina Contreras, seconded by Board Vice Chair Joe Edson to approve agenda item 23. Board Member Balthasar, how do you vote?
Aye.
Board Member Gastelum?
Aye.
Board Chair Krantz?
Yes.
Board Member McNamara?
Aye.
Board Member Sanchez. Board Member Desmond.
Aye.
Board Member Jenkins.
Aye.
Board Vice Chair Edson.
Aye.
Board Member Contreras.
Aye.
Motion passes with all board members present voting yes. Board Member Sanchez absent.
Yeah.
Great, thank
Just
you.
as a point, you marked Sanchez as a yes.
Say that again, ma'am.
You had marked Sanchez as a yes. I don't know if there's an automated counting or recording of this, but Sanchez was absent.
Yes, ma'am. I noted that.
Okay, very good. So next is item number 24, which is proposed modifications to NCTD's ordinance number 5. And at the meeting in September, the item was presented to the board as a request to set the hearing and receive public comment. The proposed modifications presented by staff support the need to provide improved parking for our transit customers, particularly increased flexibility around the development and implementation of long-term parking, which is currently very limited in the existing ordinance language. The board voted to set the hearing for the October meeting and receive public feedback as per the staff recommendation. And Karen Tukalski, the Chief Operations Officer of Support Services, will now review item number 24.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Grant. Good afternoon, board members. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present on the proposed modifications to Ordinance 5. We're going to start off with just a little bit of background. As you probably recall, our enabling legislation for the district does give the Board of Directors the authority to adopt ordinances and make any rules and regulations that are needed regarding the use, operation, and maintenance of the Nctd properties and facilities. The item in question here specifically is Ordinance number 5, which regulates parking and traffic on North County Transit District property, and that ordinance is enacted to promote the use and management of the parking lots for our transit customers. With the limited exceptions noted here, you do see that our parking lots and free parking are currently available at almost all Sprinter and Coaster stations. As Chair Kranz noted, under the current ordinance language, long-term parking is currently prohibited at NCTD parking lots without a permit, and permits are currently limited to a 7-day maximum time period and can only be issued for a maximum of 4 times per year for the same vehicle and or applicant. This does place significant constraints on a lot of our transit customers, and it does not adequately meet the needs in many factors. So one example are customers who travel out of town frequently via the airport and would wish to utilize transit to get there versus having to leave their car at one of the downtown more expensive long-term parking options and lots. Another example are customers who use transit for their daily work commute and wish to leave a vehicle at a station to facilitate their first or last mile connection. We have 3 primary proposed changes with this ordinance. First would be to remove the existing limitations on the number of days associated with long-term parking permits. Next, we would propose to remove the existing limitations on the maximum number of long-term parking permits that may be issued to any one applicant or vehicle. And then lastly, we would propose to authorize the executive director or designee to administer the parking and traffic services and systems for the district, including the ability to develop and implement long-term parking programs in accordance with the overall ordinance provisions. Following the approval of the board at the September meeting to set the public hearing and consider proposed modifications to ordinance number 5, staff did go out and notice the hearing and solicit public feedback. The notice regarding the hearing and public comment period was published in 2 local newspapers. It was also posted on our GoNCTD.com website and shared via social media. To date, we have not received any public comments on these proposed changes. So before you today are staff recommendations, which are twofold. First, we would recommend that the Board of Directors receive the proposed modifications, waive the full reading of the ordinance, and then receive and consider public comments. Thereafter, staff would recommend that the board close the public hearing and adopt the proposed modifications to ordinance number 5 as stated herein. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. Do we have any public comments on this agenda item?
We do not, sir.
Okay, I see no raised hands with questions, so I would entertain a motion regarding the closing of the public hearing and approve agenda item 24.
Motion by Edson to close the public hearing and approve item per staff's recommendation.
Second by Karina Contreras.
On the motion of Board Vice Chair Joel Edson, seconded by Board Member Karina Contreras to close the public hearing for agenda item 24. Board Member Valentin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Board Member Gastelum?
Aye.
Board Chair Krantz?
Yes.
Board Member McNamara?
Yes.
Board Member Sanchez? Board Member Desmond?
Aye.
Board Member Jenkins? Board Vice Chair Edson?
Aye.
Board Member Contreras? Board Member Jenkins, are you there?
Yes, aye.
Thank you, ma'am. On the motion of Board Vice Chair Joel Edson, seconded by Board Member Karina Contreras to close the public hearing and approve agenda item 24. Motion passes with all board members present voting yes. Board Member Sanchez absent.
Okay, thank you. And moving on to item number 25, Laura Cote, the Chief Administrative Officer, will review this item, which is proclamation regarding a local emergency to re-ratify the state of emergency, et cetera, et cetera. So Laura, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Chair. So this item is asking the board to consider the option of holding virtual meetings for the month of November under the new Assembly Bill 361. Just want to offer a little bit of background. On September 16, 2021, the Governor Newsom signed AB 361 into law, which modified the provisions of the government code related to teleconference public meetings. The key provisions are noted in the attached resolution. However, I'd like to highlight some of those here. A local agency may use teleconferencing without complying with certain requirements of the Brown Act, such as posting an agenda at every location where a board member is participating from, so long as the legislative body holds a meeting during a proclaimed state of emergency. And that state or local officials have imposed or recommended measures to promote social distancing. And for the purposes of determining by majority vote whether as a result of the emergency, meeting in person would present imminent risk to the health or safety of attendees as well as those that are participating in the meeting. As part of your agenda item, we included a health officer telecommuting recommendation from the County of San Diego that was issued on September 23rd. In summary, this memo notes that utilizing teleconferencing options for public meetings is an effective and recommended social distancing measure to facilitate participation in public affairs. It further notes that this recommendation was intended to satisfy the requirements under the Brown Act. One final note, the board is required to insert continuing findings every 30 days should you wish to continue holding meetings virtually. So this action is intended to be placed on the agenda during the state of emergency. So the recommendation before you today is to adopt one of the two recommendations that are noted in this slide. One, adopt resolution number 21-07, proclaiming a local emergency, re-ratifying the proclamation of a state of emergency and reauthorizing remote teleconference meetings of the legislative bodies of North County Transit District in compliance with Assembly Bill 361 and pursuant to the Brown Act provisions. Or two, resume in-person meetings beginning November 1st, 2021. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you for that. Vice Chair Edson.
Yes, so it's a little unclear today. We've been doing really well, but today we seem to be having a few technical difficulties. So I just wanted to confirm that based on, do I understand correctly that based on the advice of the esteemed Wilma Wooten, that we are encouraged to continue to meet remotely and practice social distancing? Is that correct?
You're asking me, then that is the recommendation that I interpret from the County of San Diego.
Thank you.
Board Member Bhat Patel.
Sure, yeah, thank you for the presentation. And yeah, similar to Board Member Edson, I just wanted to ask our team, because I know at the City of Carlsbad, we just talked about this during our City Council meeting as well. So I would ask our team, you know, based on what's going on with our staff, because obviously here, our staff would also be required to attend, I'm assuming, in person if we were to attend. If we did have that, do you feel that you would be comfortable having folks in person, or do you feel that, and this is maybe for, you know, for Mr. Tucker, and then also would we have to wear face coverings? Because I know that for the City of Carlsbad, we would be requiring face coverings if we did return in person. So I just wanted to go ahead and ask those questions as well.
Thank you for the question with respect to comfort, and that obviously is here as well to answer any questions, but I'll take my first stab at this one. We are prepared to bring back individuals in person, both from a safety perspective, as well as talking with the board about how you would like to see this going forward. I think there are some protocols that we would want to discuss with respect to members of the public. But for purposes of the board coming back in person, we do have some protocols already in place, such that we also have for employees, for example, if you're fully vaccinated, masks are an option at our facility here. If you are not fully vaccinated, masks are not an option. So we're looking at all of that and are definitely prepared for that eventuality if you choose to come back.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting, and I can always talk to Mr. Tucker offline about some of my other questions regarding that. And then in terms of the, this is just also if we do decide today that we wanted to continue virtually, with regards to public participation, I was just curious because I know this was a question I had, again, for our city council meetings and similarly here. Are we able to have flexibility whenever we do decide we want to resume in person for folks that, for instance, may not feel comfortable coming in person, or if they're working, whatever that may be, are we thinking about incorporating still some sort of call-in or virtual option for them to participate in the meetings?
Yes, we are, and we're prepared to and have decided internally that offering that option on an ongoing basis is doable, and we're prepared to offer that.
Great, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Board Member Jenkins.
Let me make sure I'm unmuted. Yes. Okay, I have a question about the November 1 date. I see in the staff report under background information, it has the use of remote teleconference meetings until the earlier of November 21 or such times as the board adopts, blah, blah, blah. So are we saying it's November 1 or are we saying it's November 20th in the report?
I am reviewing that staff report, and it is November 1st, and that's actually what the resolution indicates.
Okay,
So
just checking. Thank
I think
you.
it's related to when we, you have to have these resolutions passed every 30 days. And the last,
Okay.
you know, we had that special meeting on the 30th of November. So.
Okay, I just was thinking two different dates. Thank you.
All right, Vice Chair Edson. You're muted.
I was trying to see if it would be better if everyone muted. I just wanted to follow up on Board Member Bhat Patel's question regarding hybrid or virtual. Would that be an option for both board members and employees and the public?
that is correct.
Okay. Thanks.
But it's my understanding that it's hybrid from the standpoint of being able to, board members would be able to zoom in or call in, but they would be required to, we would be required to go back to the old method of posting on the agenda the location of where you will be joining the meeting, and have the option for members of the public to join in at that location with you. Is that, do I understand that correctly?
You do have that correct, Chair. So if you adopt this resolution today, then you do have the option for hybrid meetings, such as if you were both virtual and here, without the notice of the agenda at each location from where you're participating. The difference is if the resolution is not adopted, hybrid meetings are still available to you under the classic or the old Board Brown Act regulations, and that means that postings will have to occur at each location. Members of the public would need to access the locations that you're participating from. So that's the difference between adopting this resolution and not adopting the resolution.
Okay, Board Member Jenkins.
I didn't lower my hand, sorry.
Oh, okay. All right, well, we at the City of Encinitas have now held a couple of in-person meetings, and we were masked up. It was fairly successful in both cases. We had a cooperative public attendance. Both meetings were well attended, and everybody followed the rules with regard to masks. So I know we're working our way towards that, but the will of the board here, whether we want to declare this emergency to continue to have the teleconferencing meetings is understandable, but at this point, I think we need to make a choice between one or the other here, and with that, I think we would ask for a motion.
This is Carrie Gasterland. I'll move to adopt the alternative proclaiming a local emergency, re-ratifying the proclamation of a state of emergency, and reauthorizing remote teleconference meetings, and so on.
McNamara seconds.
All right, very good.
On the motion of Board Member Terry Gasterland, seconded by Board Member Paul McNamara, to adopt resolution number 21, TAC 07, to ratify the proclamation of a state of emergency and reauthorize remote teleconference meetings. Board Member Bapatal, how do you vote?
Aye.
Board Member Gasterland?
Aye.
Board Chair Krantz?
Yes.
Board Member McNamara?
Aye.
Board Member Sanchez? Board Member Desmond?
No.
Board Member Jenkins?
Yes.
Board Vice Chair Edson?
Yes.
Board Member Contreras?
Aye.
Motion passes with all board members present voting yes. Board Member Desmond votes no. Board Member Sanchez absent.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to informational item number 26. And this is this is the one informational item on the agenda. Tracy Foster, the Chief Development Officer, is going to review this item. And last week, in order to ensure the continued process transparency and as part of its efforts to collaborate with the California Coastal Commission and the City of Del Mar, Nctd issued a press release which included the mapping, visual impact analysis, and simulations of the proposed right-of-way fencing on the Del Mar Bluffs, which we are about to see in this presentation. Staff has conducted tours of the Del Mar Bluffs to assist all key stakeholders in understanding the purpose and need of the proposed fencing. And Nctd staff and its consultant have already provided a presentation of this material to the Del Mar City Council at its regular meeting earlier this week. At this point, I would like to turn it over to Tracy to kick off the presentation.
Thank you for that introduction, Chairman Krantz, and good afternoon, board members. Today, I am joined by Nctd's Director of Engineering and Maintenance, Scott Leschke. He's here in our boardroom. And online with you via Zoom is Mike Singleton, who is our consultant with KTUA, which is a sub-consultant of Civil Pros. Now, before getting into the presentation today, I'd like to explain what this presentation is intended to provide, as well as give a brief background on the right-of-way fencing process to date. At the May board meeting this year, the Nctd Board of Directors approved a task order to Civil Pros to perform mapping of fencing with property boundaries and visual impact modeling. Our next steps at that time of the presentation were to have the work completed in October, which we met that deadline, and we're here today to present that work. This presentation is not intended to review as to why fencing is needed. That information was previously presented to the board at the November 19th, 2020 board workshop meeting, or review any property ownership rights or specific detail on geotech assessment. This presentation is focused on the placement and the alternative design as requested by the board. So jumping into the background, in 2018, Nctd was awarded $1.2 million in funding for the Railway Safety Enhancement Project through the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, and there was a $300,000 match requirement. To further support the advancement of the right-of-way fencing, in 2020, a trespasser risk reduction study was completed in June, and shortly thereafter, Nctd commenced various outreach efforts with the cities of Oceanside, Encinitas, and Del Mar, which included a presentation to the City Council of Del Mar in January of this year. In December 2020, Nctd, the City of Del Mar, and the California Coastal Commission executed a settlement discussion agreement, delaying regulatory review by the Surface Transportation Board and determination of Nctd's rights as a rail carrier related to maintenance and safety projects as requested in the petition. The original expiration of this agreement was March, however, it was extended to December 31st of this year. Moving into 2021, Nctd, the California Coastal Commission, and the City of Del Mar established a working group which meets regularly. Part of that working group effort, and as Chairman Krantz indicated, included site visits to the Del Mar Bluff by stakeholders and our board and other elected officials. As just reviewed, we engaged with Civil Pros to perform the mapping and the visualization work in response to the inquiries by the California Coastal Commission and the City of Del Mar. I'd also just want to briefly update you on the progress that we've made on Oceanside and Encinitas. As you know, the Encinitas construction contract was just awarded today. So we'll be commencing with that construction. Earlier this year, Oceanside construction contract for fencing was awarded, and that construction is scheduled to commence by the end of this year. And so as to next steps, as we wrap up this year and approach the expiration of the settlement discussion, we'll continue our efforts with the city and the Coastal Commission. So throughout this entire process, throughout this entire process, Nctd's goal has been to have a collaborative, constructive, and transparent process. In doing so, we've highlighted the concerns that we have heard. So first off, the original fencing plan was viewed as severe, with 6-foot high fencing along the right-of-way lines on both sides of the tracks. This modified plan that has been developed, while continuing to enhance our safety, reduces the amount of fencing by almost 50%. And additionally, it also takes the fencing height down to 4 feet for nearly half of the project. We've also heard concerns regarding the fence post holes and the weight of the fence having an adverse effect on the bluff. And in response, Nctd had a review performed by Layton Engineering, who is the geotech engineer that has worked on the Del Mar Bluff stabilization for the last 20 years. Layton's review concluded that the fencing will not impact the bluff or track bed stability and will not promote additional erosion. As it relates to viewshed impacts, that's what we're here to present to you today. The work that's being presented will identify fencing alternatives, fencing mapping, and visual impact modeling. And lastly, as it relates to access, you may recall that Nctd and the City of Del Mar are working with SANDAG on the Coastal Connection Study to identify opportunities for safe and legal crossings across the railroad. We've additionally heard of impacts to evacuation plans, and while we're still continuing our research on that to date, we've not found any established evacuation plans that allow for safe and legal crossings to the beach. And now I will turn it over to Scott Leslie to continue to present our work.
Thank you, Tracy. So as Tracy introduced, today's presentation is a result of the mapping and visual analysis that KTUA and Civil Pros have done over the last couple of months. And just a note up front, that mapping they did was based on what the working group had developed as a revised mapping laydown or revised fencing laydown. And so what you'll see today is essentially the general layout that we provided to Civil Pros and KTUA back in May to start this visual analysis and further mapping with some minor changes during their process and as discussed during the working group or through the working group during that process. Again, as Tracy mentioned, the intent of today's presentation is to walk through that visual analysis and mapping and to explain how that was developed and answer some questions on what that shows. Any questions, though, on where we're placing fencing and what types of fencing we're using really needs to be directed through that confidential working group to continue our discussions at that level. And again, as Chairman Kranz mentioned a few minutes ago, this similar presentation or the same presentation was presented to the City of Del Mar City Council on Monday, October 18th. So with that, real quick overview was mentioned a minute ago in Tracy's initial slides. The modified fencing plan does decrease the fencing from just under 13,000 linear feet to just under 7,000 linear feet with a combination of now with modified fence, 6-foot fencing and 42-inch fall protection throughout the area. Also, you can see a couple of the visuals that you'll see further on in more detail to show that fall protection, 42-inch fencing, as well as the chain link fencing. And lastly, I'll note and I'll show as we go through the mapping, some sections of the fencing have been identified to be done later as a second phase based on the planned construction during Del Mar Plus 5, and I'll identify where those locations are in the maps. So the maps, I'm going to run through just as a quick overview to provide orientation to the visual analysis that will be provided by our consultant in following the map overview. And I'm going to start at the north end at Coast Highway. Coming in at the north end, there will be, the start of the fencing will be a 4-foot chain link fence as required by CPUC regulations for 150 feet from the crossing. So that's indicated by the solid green line on the west side of the tracks. There is no fencing planned on the east side of the tracks at that location, simply because there's not enough space to put it in there, and really topography or current access really doesn't require it nor allow it. There would be a short section at the very entrance just to provide a visual barrier. Further on down, basically across from Seagrove Park, and as you come up from Powerhouse Park, the fence would transition as the green line turns to blue from a 4-foot chain link fence to a 6-foot chain link fence. And that would continue to run from this map until the next map that I show on the west side of the tracks. You'll also see a short section just to the bottom of your screen or below that blue line, which is to the west, of a single strand post and cable, which is proposed and planned to basically provide just a visual barrier for people that are walking on walking paths to keep them from coming up to the track level. As you can see in the maps, there's dashed lines. The brown dashed lines indicate walking paths that have developed over time and are used by people to both transfer from off and on to the right-of-way, but also along the right-of-way and down to the beach, and then also in some areas in the upper bluffs. So those show kind of where the general foot traffic typically occurs, and so the intent is to keep them off of the right-of-way for the safety objectives of the fencing. In this location, the third map down, so just south of Seagrove Park, is where the blue fence on the west side of the tracks stops, and the dashed blue line starts on the east side. That blue dashed line indicates the second phase that would be done following Del Mar Plus 5 in about 2 years. And so that would not be part of, any of the dashed line would not be part of the first phase. And from this point forward, you'll see is the rest of the fencing. There is no additional fencing further south planned on the west side of the tracks, only on the east side of the tracks going from this point further south. Now we're down by 13th Street, and the blue fence line continues. There's a short section of fall protection post and cable planned at the very end of 13th Street to keep people from walking down to track level and getting up against the fence at that point. Then continuing down through 12th Street, similarly the blue dash line, future phase of the 6-foot chain link fence continues and continues through 11th Street, 10th Street, and then at 9th Street, at the very south end of 9th Street, you'll see the orange line start, and that's where the 42-inch post and cable fence would start at the end of that stone wall at the end of 9th Street, and that would continue basically to the southern end on the east side of the fencing area. The blue dash line will continue down just past 7th Street, and that's really to provide a barrier for people not to get onto the right-of-way. The upper bluffs fencing is to prevent people from coming down to that down to track level to start with. And so you can see as we come down here, the fencing for both the post and cable and the future phase of the 6-foot chain link fence continues. And then, as I mentioned, just past 7th Street, the last section of chain link fence at track level would end on the east side, and that would be the end of going south of any chain link fence as currently planned. And the post and cable will continue as mentioned to the end of the zone mapping area as shown. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Singleton from our consultant to walk us through then the visual analysis that was developed for the proposed fencing plan.
Thanks, Scott. Well, as you know, a picture says 1,000 words, so I don't have to say a lot to some of the visual simulations. But before I start on that, a little bit about the process. Our team did spend a lot of time out in the field, took about 3,000 photographs, and we ran viewshed maps, which basically we take very up-to-date LiDAR data, which is a 3D form of all the data. It was actually filmed from a helicopter, so it's very up-to-date and very accurate. That was the basis of our model. Then we developed an accurate fence model that's dropped onto that LiDAR data so that all the placement of the fencing lands in the right spot. And at that point, we match up our photographs with the actual model, and we export those out of the 3D program into Photoshop and merge it with the actual file of the photograph that's on the site. And we use all types of measures to make sure that they're accurately placed in the right location and the right scale. And then on the movies that you'll see at the end of this, we actually exported that model back out and dropped it into Google Earth. Google Earth actually does include LiDAR data, which includes, landforms, structures, and trees. It's a little bit rougher in Google Earth than the actual model that we laid everything out in. But it's also effective for you to kind of see it in the context because it does show you buildings and trees and other elements at that point. So if you'd like to go on to the next slide, Scott. Our tools that we work with were primarily the security fence. In this particular case, you can kind of see in the upper what the 6-foot fence would actually look like. The intent is to use an upper cable rail that will strengthen the top of the fence without it being a large amount of horizontal pieces that are needed. But every once in a while you need some bracing, especially when you get towards gates. Our study also looked at, are there other materials that could be used for that same 6-foot requirement? And there are 2 different manufacturers of welded wire fence, which is actually stronger than chain link and a little bit more difficult to climb. And in a lot of cases, even though that upper model doesn't really show it, it's generally a little bit more transparent than chain link is, especially when you look on it on an angle. Next slide. So in what sometimes you're hearing it as a 4-foot fence, it's actually 42 inches in height to the top of the cable. And in this case, we have the top one is shown as a 4-strand under tension cable system that is a steel component in the center that's supporting that. The middle one is actually using the same thing except for a wood post, which is an Ipe wood post, a very hard wood that holds up well within tougher conditions. And then in the one location at the north end, we do have a single strand, which is more of a droop cable that goes between the wood posts. And this is similar to what you'll see if you ever hike any of the trails around Torrey Pines. Next slide. So again, the typical on a chain link fence, you will sometimes have this upper horizontal bar in order to stiffen it. But in this particular case, our renderings, it was decided could get by with the tension cable on the top. Next. The welded wire mesh is a very small opening, less than 2 inches wide. So it's very difficult to get a foot in there. And it's made of a gauge of material that is very difficult to cut compared to chain link. And then next, and then as we mentioned before, the straight on shots are the ones that have the greatest visibility through them. So those are the tools that we were actually working with. Now to go on to the first map, just to give you an orientation. So the key view location where the photograph was taken from is shown in that yellow asterisk. In this case, north is straight up. The legend on the bottom though is going from north to the left to south to the right. And so you can just see as we move from the north to the south where these key views were. The key views were originally developed by staff and in consultation with Del Mar and Coastal Commission. However, there were a few more that were at our suggestions were added after we did the view shed analysis, which basically takes any point within the entire area and analyzes what it can actually see. There's some areas that we felt that there were some additional simulations that would be suggested in this location. So if you go on to the next one, all of them start off with existing conditions, and then we start showing the simulation on top of them. At this first point, though, we actually use this as an opportunity to experiment with some of the different fence types and colors to see how they would appear. And it's really important to understand that the visibility of a fence depends a lot on its background. So as it's seeing it against a foaming ocean waves that are closer to the beach is different from the blue sky and the blue water and different from dark areas in the back. So this is the 6-foot chain link fence, black vinyl. And the next one basically shows that if it was galvanized, which means it doesn't have the black vinyl on it, in some cases it actually has less contrast with the background, but in other cases it has more. As you can see in front of that vegetation there, some of it stands out more. So that was one of the options we looked at. The welded wire fence, this is an example of what the welded wire fence would look like. Again, it's a stronger fence, but it's basically the same height. And then we also looked at, in some cases, if we move the fence, could we lower its visibility and view blockage? So in this case, it's downslope, still within the right of way of Nctd. And then on the next one, you can see if it was galvanized instead of the black vinyl coated. And then next. All right, so as we move down the coast, the second simulation is from the beach looking back to the east. Next. You can see some improvements related to Nctd's right away, but the fence on top of it, as it was originally shown in the WSP safety study, that will be the one that we're showing each time first, and then the second one is shown what we've modified it towards. So a little bit further back and not quite as far down is what the original WSP plan would be. Next. And this is a public area that public does tend to gather and look at some of the views. As you see the next slide, it is very picturesque and a very broad open view, which is a real attraction. So on the 6-foot original location is shown here. And then we have brought it down slope further away from this. And so it keeps it so it doesn't silhouette against the water and silhouette against the ocean itself. And it happens to line up very well with the tracks. So it's almost difficult to actually see it from this location. Next, as we look back towards the northwest in a similar location, the view again is very open. And the original location of this had it at the property line. So it would be something that you would need to look through to see the view. And then we have it at the bottom of the slope itself so you can see over it. Next. Again, another one from the beach area looking back to the east. Not much you can see here from improvements except for obviously the wall at the bottom. That would be the original location of the 6-foot chain link fence. And in our plan, we do not run this that same fence down this location, so there's no elements related to the fencing that you would see. At this location, we are now looking basically back out to the west. And it's a popular gathering spot, the chain link fence where it was originally proposed at 6 foot. This is the first spot where you really see what the 4-cable 42-inch fence would actually be in this location, the fall protection fence. And then we did show also if it was an Ipe wood, what it would actually look like. A little bit more rustic, a little bit thicker, but still something that fits in well with the color and the rustic nature of this portion of the coast. At the end of 12th Street, we have a straight out west shot. Again, pretty broad. This is where you start seeing what the private property owners may also see. The original fence was at the property line. So in this case is on this side of the plant material itself, but you can see in the backyard of that one property would be at their property line, which is up and elevated pretty high. So under the modified location of that fence, it sits down low. And again, it silhouettes within the ballast point without poking into the actual water. And this came as a result of our very detailed analysis of visibility and view shed analysis to get it in the right place to have the least amount of visual blockage. End of 11th Street, slightly to the northwest. Broader view looking up towards the northwest, and the original fence location on both sides at this location is what was originally proposed. And now it's on the single side closer to the ballast itself and a little bit lower. It's not quite as extremely lower in this location, but as you move to the south, the fence location we have it now is much lower than what it would have been at the property lines. At the end of 9th Street, this one looks a little bit to the southwest. This is where the cable system of the fall protection would show up, original location. And you'll also notice that some of the temporary fencing that was in this area kind of disappeared because it would be replaced with the fall fence that you're seeing really only on the left-hand side going away from this particular image itself. End of 7th Street, looking straight out west. Again, you see the temporary stranded fence out there that was used for revegetation purposes. The chain link fence as originally proposed, and then the fall protection fence, 42-inch, out towards the edge of the bluff itself. 6th Street, similar situation. The original fence in this location, and then the proposed fence much further away and lower. And at 4th Street, another gathering spot that a lot of people do come to. This is a little bit closer in view for the fall protection fence would be, but not as close as where the 6-foot fence was proposed. And then our last shot in the visual simulation set is from the beach looking back up at the south end of the corridor. It's very difficult to see on here, but right below the condominiums, when he turns to the next slide, you'll see a portion of the 6-foot fence that was originally proposed here. And then under the current plan, there would be no fence that you would see from this location, except for a couple little posts way up high on that upper bench where the fall protection fence would be. Now, at this point, we were going to go through and show you what these look like going from north to south in terms of in Google Earth. The model dropped in there. It's not quite as accurate as our other models are on the overall simulations that we've done, but it gives you a much better idea of the context of the environment that these fences would sit in. So again, the movie you'll see first on this is the one that starts from the north and includes the WSP fences from the original study. The 4-foot chain link occurs along this edge, and then it converts to the 6-foot chain link. And as you get down towards the end here, it stops on the one side and is picked up on the other at the top of the bluffs and continuing along where basically the right-of-way edge is. As you see, it crosses in front of some of these other properties, in some cases based on the right-of-way, the property line and the fence location changes. Pretty much at all the street ends, the original 6-foot chain link fence was blocking right at pretty close to the street ends, but like in this case on 12th Street, it's down slope a bit. And then on the original plan, the 6-foot fence started again on the west side, and it's continuing on the east side as well. And so at this point, you basically have two fences on the two extremes of the right-of-way itself. Some of the fencing is shown on the on the east side of some of the existing trails that would prevent the use of those traditional trails that have been used for quite some time. In this location, again, it's way up there towards the property, so you don't see it along the culvert where we're showing it now. And that's one of the big differences between the old location of the fences and the new location. The bluff, as you can see here, starts getting steeper and steeper towards this end. And when we show our model on this one, you'll see that we drop the fence on the east side because of the difficulty to even attempt to go up these steep slopes themselves. So it pretty much is the same all the way down to the end. You can start seeing that other 6-foot fence at the property or the right-of-way edge at the top of the bluff that shows there. And then it stops in this location because there's no way of getting past this particular point. But it still continues on the west side down to the pinch point itself of where basically the landform has changed more recently with the failure. So in this particular case, we're showing it on our modified layout. It starts in the same location, has similar notes to it. It would still be the 4-foot chain link right at the beginning as you come in. It does transition to the 6-foot chain link, but we do have that single post cable along the edge of the trails to define the edge and define the end of that trail system. It's not up on the bluff of the park in this location. We go much further towards the south and then cross over to the lower portion of the slopes instead of the upper portion of the property. This obviously allows everyone to really see over the top of it much better in that particular location. It doesn't block at the ends of the streets like the original location did. So you will see it from some of the streets, but you'll certainly in most cases be looking over it. So all along here, it's at the edge of the ballast basically, and at the edge of the slope that's dropping down. So as we get a little bit further down here, you'll start seeing where the fall protection fence comes in at 9th Street. But right now it's still just the one fence location that's running down on this side. So once we see this retaining wall that we're passing by here, you'll see the cable fencing starting up on the on the west side of the existing trails to accommodate continued use of that trail system. And as I mentioned before, as the slope gets steeper going to the south, we do stop it at this location down at the track level, but continue with the fall fence on top. So there's nothing at the ballast level, there's nothing to the west or the east the rest of the way down, just the fall fence on top of the bluff. So that would basically get us down to the end. It continues down at this point. You'll see where the end is, but in general, that gives you an overview of the environment that it's sitting within. It's a little bit jumpy because we're showing it on screen, but and doing it across Zoom, but this gives you an idea of where those fence locations would be, especially as it relates to private property, street ends, and landforms that exist in the area, which are very unique. So that finishes off the discussion and topics of showing you what those simulations would look like in context and comparison. The two different methods that were used, or I should say the two different studies that were used, back to the WSP study and to our most recent modified version.
Thank you, Mike. I realize that that's a lot of information to take in, and so for anyone who would like to take an additional look at that, all of the visual simulations and mapping can be found on Nctd's website. As far as our next steps, as we previously mentioned, we still do have some work to do, and so by the end of the year, we do intend to finalize the agreement with Nctd and the City of Del Mar for use of Nctd's right-of-way along the upper bluff. We also intend to finalize the fencing option types and further discuss the feedback that we've received as a result of the presentation of this work within our working group. And additionally, by the end of this year, Nctd will seek approval from the Board of Directors to provide authority to Nctd staff to award a fencing contract based upon the final fencing plan. And with that, that concludes our presentation, and we're happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Anthony, do we have public comments?
We do, sir. We have 2 voicemails that I'll be playing for the board. We also have 3 registered public speakers. I do want to know, sir, that one of the voicemails goes past 3 minutes to approximately 3 minutes and 45 seconds. My intention was to cut off at 3 minutes. However, I will await your direction if you'd like to entertain the public speaker.
Yes, let's hear all the complete message.
Yes, sir. So I'll be playing the telephony comments now.
Calling. I have watched your so-called updated plan forward about the fencing in Del Mar. You have changed nothing, not some new options. The fence is doing the same as before.
Hey, Anthony, we can't hear this.
The sound quality is terrible. This is Camilla Rang from Del Mar speaking, and this doesn't sound very much like her.
We all have, I think we all have to mute.
Yes, everybody mute, and let's see what happens after that.
I am calling for.
I'll note that one of the speakers on 760 ending in 722 is not muted, and that may be the source of the feedback. And the volume is not very high. I think it's Tracy Foster's cell phone that we're seeing as the phone number, and that's not muted.
That is our dialing here, ma'am.
Yeah, that's how we are currently managing the meeting, Terry. So that's what Anthony's on, and he's trying to play the audio on that one. But it's we can't hear it. So how about we move to the folks who are on the line ready to speak?
Yes, sir. So we have 3 public speakers, sir. Our first public speaker is Ms. Shirley Wise, followed by Ms. Karen Lair, followed by Grant Bernstein. And as a reminder, we have 3 minutes to speak. I will start the timer once we hear the audio. Ms. Weiss, are you there? Ms. Weiss, can you hear us?
I tried to unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to address my comments to the upper bluff. I believe that fencing on the upper bluff should be opposed and should be changed by the NCTD in this analysis for 4 reasons. Number one, the upper bluff is unstable, and the pounding and drilling that will be affected by placing the fence will be further destabilizing. The expert report that the NCTD has with respect to the effect of fencing is cursory and inadequate to address the serious issues that would be affected by the destabilizing effect of fencing. Second, fencing is superfluous on the upper bluff. No one has fallen for over 100 years. No one has jumped from the upper bluff. The risks inherent in walking in a beautiful site such as that are open and notorious, and there is no need for a fence. Third, you're understating the visual impact of the fence. Most of your view shed analyses are not taken from the place where people would see it, and from the homes on the upper bluff where people would look out to it. It would be obstructive all along that area. Fourth, and most importantly, the NCTD simply does not have the right, under the right of way legally, to put a fence on the upper bluff. Its easement is restricted to the maintenance and operation of the railway. The railway is not on the upper bluff simply because the NCTD thinks it is a good idea, or even that it's well-intentioned, is not a legal reason to expand the easement, which is narrowly construed under California law, to give it the right to place a fence on the upper bluff. It is simply paternalistic and overreach, and this is an item that should be left to the discretion of the city and its residents. Finally, just addressing the fencing at 10th and 11th. First of all, I'm not sure why you would put black fencing anywhere, but between 10th and 11th, the deed specifically, expressly reserves perpetually a right of access to the beach. If NCTD were to place a fence at that point, this would be trespassing, it would be violative of the deed, and it is a matter of negotiation for NCTD to build an alternative bridge, underpass, or access at grade. But the deed, unlike other areas of the deed, specifically reserves a perpetual right of way to access to the beach. So this would also be an illegal action on the part of NCTD. So I know you're in negotiation mode. I very much hope that you revisit the issue of the upper bluff. It is superfluous, it is obstructive, it is illegal, and it is not necessary to prevent a fall. Thank you very much.
Up next, we have Karen Lair. Karen, can you hear us?
Yes, I sure can. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Hello, NCTD board chair and board members. NCTD has gone way, way, way too far with their current plans to stabilize and fence the bluffs. I really wonder, how did we get from stabilizing the slide area with soldier piles and tiebacks to fencing both the upper and lower bluffs, decapitating and grading the bluffs, and installing seawalls almost the entire length of the coast in Del Mar? Your geologist report talks about fragile sandstone bluffs. So then, doesn't common sense tell us if something is fragile, don't drill fence posts into it, only causing more destruction and opening up new places for the water intrusion that will ultimately erode the sandstone? The current plans from NCTD to fence the top bluff, which, by the way, you do not even have the right to do so legally, goes beyond your mandate to operate the train and is just throwing away taxpayer money. No one has fallen off the top bluff. Walkers along the top bluff are aware of the issues and risks and do not need a fence. The train does not run along the top bluff. Putting fencing along the lower bluff in areas too narrow to meet the railroad's own worker safety rules makes no sense either if you really look at the science and the data. Erecting fences in an area that is not where the majority of the accidents and suicides have occurred. Again, digging more holes in fragile sandstone. Focus on the areas by the 15th Street crossing where the problems have occurred, a targeted approach. The same approach, by the way, you've used in the past to support areas of concern on the bluff that has been working for all of us. In NCTD's recent presentation, I feel like we're being played. The first version of fencing was so bad and so egregious that anything would look better than it. And now you're trying to say see how good this is and how we listen to you. And again, I don't mean to be demeaning to the team that's been working on this, because I know this is your assignment, but the first was so bad. Anything, of course, looks better, but still, it's not necessary and not needed. As a board of the NCTD, it's incumbent on all of you to be sure you fully understand the impacts of this plan will have. The impacts not only to Del Mar visitors, but all coastal town residents and visitors, as access to beaches is walled off, sand erosion on our beaches speeds up with the installation of seawalls, and some of the last remaining untouched bluffs are decimated. Proposals to fence the tracks and stabilize the bluffs are really linked and should be looked at that way. It's hard to separate these two, as the current fencing plan will lead to more stability issues. Ask questions. Ask for an independent geologist, not the same one that relies on a majority of their income from Nctd and the railroads. Thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate it. Nctd must not be allowed to go forward with their current proposal. Thank you.
Up next, we have Graham Bernstein. He will also be sharing a presentation. Mr. Bernstein, are you there?
Yes. Good afternoon.
Yes,
first slide, please. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you see me? Can you see the slides?
Yes, the slides
Good
are up.
afternoon. My name is Graham. Good afternoon. My name is Graham Bernstein. I'm a concerned homeowner on the Del Mar Bluffs. The Del Mar Bluffs fence proposed by the Nctd makes no sense. It will worsen erosion on the lower bluffs and destroy our homes on the upper bluffs. Next slide, please. The erosion of these fragile sandstone bluffs is truly shocking. Bluff weakness, fractures, and collapses result from vibration from trains, pounding from rainstorms, and water intrusion. Shown on the right is the recent massive lower bluff collapse, which occurred right next to the train track on the lower bluffs. Next slide, please. From the upper bluffs in front of my house, we can see some of the work that Sandag has been doing to try to support the train track on the lower bluffs. This is likely to be a recurring theme until the track is moved eastwards. But will Sandag do the same construction to support the upper bluffs to save our homes? I strongly doubt it. Next slide, please. For example, shown here are the upper bluffs in front of my home, with only 25 feet of unstable, fragile sandstone under the bushes to spare. Next slide, please. The proposed fence and its drilling and concrete foundations will destabilize both the lower and upper bluffs and worsen water intrusion, predisposing to further collapses, causing danger to the trains and loss of homes. Next slide, please. Down below on the lower bluff, on the other side of the track, the available 12 feet is too narrow on which to build a fence. And this is the case for most of the 1.5 miles of proposed fencing. And remember, nobody has ever climbed up or down the steep bluffs in this area to be struck by a train. And as Karen and Shirley said, fall protection fences are not necessary either. People just don't fall down. Next slide, please. So please, stop the Nctd from building the fences on the Del Mar Bluffs. Thanks for your time and attention.
Chair Grants, we are going to attempt to replay the voicemails received earlier.
Okay.
My name is Camilla Mack. I am calling for item number 26 for Thursday's meeting. I have watched your so-called updated plans in
It's impossible to hear.
nothing but some new options. The fence is doing the same as before. Destroy and undermine our bluff and hinder all access to public beach. We live on top of the bluff and you want to drill 1,500 holes into it? How is that safe? You put your own geological survey done by a very biased company that depend on your income, who say drilling all those holes in the bluff will not affect the erosion rate. Meanwhile, completely ignore
nor other studies and information sent to you by, for example, engineer Laura DeMarco, that says the complete opposite. It is not safe. Not only is the fence undermining the bluff and increases the danger of erosion for all of us living there, you're also cutting us off from our escape route in case of wildfires. Do you really want to have all of those lives on your conscience? You also have the audacity to say that you have decreased the amount of fencing. Yes, because you realized that there was not enough room to put a fence on the west side of the tracks. And now you try to make it sound like you're going as a favor. You start off with a maximum nuclear option, and now you think we should somehow be grateful that you're only dropping 9 bombs on us instead of 10. You are underestimating our intelligence. You also know very well that from the 1910 deed, you have a legal obligation to allow a 40 feet at ground crossing at the bluff between 10th and 11th Street. I don't see anything on that on your plans. You putting up a fence there, it is you breaking the law, not us. You behave like bullies and dictators. We've asked you before and ask you again. Instead of a dangerous and erosion-causing fence installation, we want the following safe alternatives, and listen carefully. Tune to 3 safe crossings with lights and the beam that warns when the train is coming. Warning lights along the rails for the hearing impaired when the train is coming. More signs that this is indeed an active railroad and crossing is only allowed at the marked crossings. A fence could be a possibility closer to Coast Boulevard where most accidents have happened. Bluff has not really started over there yet and is not as prone to erosion. And put a rush order on getting that train off Bluff. If you implement these changes, you show that you listen to the people, nature, and safety, and the Stockholm negotiation will not just be for show. Stop bullying us and start behaving like decent human beings and democratically elected leaders. Thank you.
Will we play the second one now, sir?
Yes, sir.
My name is Payson Stevens. I'm a Delmar resident and homeowner for 49 years. I'm commenting on item 26, receive update on Delmar Bluffs right-of-way fencing mapping for the October 21st, 2021 hearing meeting. Respected Nctd members, I add my voice to the many concerned citizens of Delmar and beyond in raising our strong opposition to the excessive Nctd fencing plans proposed for the Delmar Bluffs. We have many legitimate concerns, which also have legal grounds, as indicated in the citizens' petition sent to the California Coastal Commission. What is at stake for the bluffs are: 1, excessive, unproven, destructive, and bluff destabilizing fencing plans. 2, attempting to fence the upper bluffs, which Nctd may not have a legal right to. 3, Nctd's STB lawsuit undermining the California Coastal Commission's legal mandate. 4, the coastal rights of all California citizens for access to the coast, views, and preserving coastal features and beauty. 5, Nctd setting a dangerous precedent for other coastal issues with your STB, State Transportation Board lawsuit. 6, using our taxpayer money for fencing and lawsuits and disregarding the community's legitimate fencing concerns. Your plans, even the most recent modified one shown at the Delmar Council meeting on October 18th, attempt to railroad our community in denying us 100-year access of almost a 2-mile stretch of the last coastal bluff trails and natural features of the San Diego North County coast. The bluff trails will be denied to everyone, along with the destruction of not only the bluffs, but the flora and fauna that add to their intrinsic natural importance and beauty. The scraping of the upper bluffs, which had no right to be done, shows the sterile result of paving paradise. We all recognize the near-term need to protect the trains and tracks from the dangers associated with the bluff's geology. This requires an EIR and its processes to assess the least damaging bluff impacts. Your fencing plans are an attempt to deny us our rights of access. The destabilizing dangers of thousands of heavy fence post holes have been stated by others. They are part of the citizens' petition and the public record of our opposition. Apart from the fences at the Coast Boulevard Railroad crossing, where most accidents have occurred, the fencings have little to do with the temporary bluff engineering that will shore up the most vulnerable areas of the cliffs. Your plans must ultimately be determined by input from the many stakeholders and independent engineers and coastal processes experts and scientists as part of the democratic process. The timely removal of the trains from the bluffs for all the multiple reasons everyone knows have been stated for decades. Nctd's attempts to put up fences where they are not needed will be opposed with all our collective pressure and not with long-term engineering plans permanently destroying what we all value. Thank you.
That concludes our public comment, sir. I would like to note that both of the telephonic comments were provided to the board verbatim via email. Earlier, the public comments sent to the full board. I will also make the telephonic comments available on our website and will send to the board separately after the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would like to thank Tracy Foster and Scott Loschke for their leadership and that supported the collaboration with the California Coastal Commission and the City of Del Mar to create this fencing alternative and the visual that we saw. Also, Mike Singleton of KTUA for his efforts. I think the presentation really enhances the understanding of the impact of the standard and the revised fencing plans, and is an indication of the efforts that have been undertaken by the North County Transit District to address the concerns of the community of Del Mar. So I see some raised hands here, and I will start with Supervisor Jim Desmond.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate all the simulations are very, very telling, and all the different options. I just have a question on the modified fencing, because I know we had an agreement with the city of Encinitas with modified fencing where they accepted some liability. With the modified fencing that was shown here today, would that require asking Del Mar for any liability, or would those modifications not require shared liability? I guess, are those modifications okay without having additional liability or not?
Thanks for the question. So we are, as we mentioned, have a working group that has been put together, and we have our confidentiality under our discussions agreement, which would include negotiations for the agreement. So what I can tell you right now is the working group is addressing that as part of the negotiations.
Well, as a board member, I'm going to have to know that, and if there's been a deal worked out, because the way it was presented, it seemed that the modifications were not going to need additional liability or shared liability. So I'm going to really have to know the answer to that. I realize you're working those modifications out, but if they're going to require shared liability, I, as a board member, and I think the entire board needs to know that.
We would certainly bring the agreement to the board for approval.
All right. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Board Member Gasterlin.
Yes, thank you. I have several questions. My first question is, why was there no view shed analysis at Del Mar Woods? We were told on Monday that Nctd had tried to get in touch. I can tell you my next door neighbor is president. She owns a house in Del Mar Woods and she's president, and no one tried to get in touch with their homeowners association. So what happened?
The focus of the view shed locations discussed by the working group were the ones identified and as requested by the working group were the ones identified in the view shed analysis presented here today, along as Mike mentioned.
Well, we requested Del Mar Woods. because it's a very public place.
Yes, ma'am. These were the ones that the working group identified as the top priority ones to have view shed done on.
Okay. The consultant who did the original WSP analysis, the individual is the same person who is now leading the safety study for the safe crossings. And when he came to introduce himself to the city council and give us their plan, we asked him point blank, aren't you conflicted? You did this original fencing plan. How can you do how can you be on our side? How can you do the safe crossings? And his answer was that NCTD asked him at the very last minute to put some red lines onto a satellite photo. And so the original plan that you're showing us here was never a plan. It was a sketch by a consultant who is not a planner on satellite photos. So my question is, at what point did you turn the conceptual design done quickly into a precise plan with renderings along survey lines? There had to have been an awful lot of work that went into retroactively making the August 2020 plan real. And I'll add to that question, the March 2021 plan had less fencing in it. So why was more fencing added here? For example, the 6-foot fencing at the bottom of the tracks that extends rather than stopping at the south at Melanie Way, continuing and going 6-foot high chain link fence along the tracks all the way south to 7th Street. That's a compound question. How'd you do it? And the second one is, what happened in March 2021? That's the design that we've all been working with. And this has more. And I have.
So to answer those two questions, the first is that yes, we recognize, and the report actually specifically states by WSP that it's a conceptual laydown of where that fencing is. It's more their description of where the fencing goes describes where they recommended. Their mapping was clearly stated as conceptual where it would go. Our depiction simply takes that explanation and shows how it would look based on where it would fall within the property boundary lines as described and as originally conceived. And again, it's really to provide that comparison between the length of fence, type of fence, and the conceptual location from the original concept under WSP as well in comparison with the current proposed fence layout. For your second point about the specific location, if there's a discrepancy between what's in the actual WSP report and what's been shown here, I'm not aware of it. We can certainly go back and look at it. Ultimately, I would expect that would likely be minor, and really, again, the WSP report is really provided as a comparison of what the original fencing concept was and what we're trying to get to today. But we can certainly take that back and provide clarification if there is one needed.
I think it's important for this board that we know what fencing was added in this current plan compared to the March 2021 plan, which is the last plan that this board had available to vote on. And I'll also point out that the survey markers at the end of 6th Street do not coincide with where you put fencing in your rendering in the so-called original plan. So thank you for your answer.
Yeah, just to clarify then, I think I want to make sure I'm answering the question correctly. So if you're referring to previous iterations of the modifications that the working group has been working on throughout this process, again, that's exactly it. We've been working on various solutions in that confidential working group, some of which has been communicated to, I think, the city. And so I think if you're referring to something back in March that is not the WSP, that would have been a previous iteration of the plan, and we're not necessarily going to get into that level of detail during the discussion today. Those were discussions during the confidential.
So I am referring to the March 2021 plan that was made public by NCTD and is the only plan that has been distributed to the public. So that's the original plan, that's the first plan, and that's the only plan that has ever been made public. So I'll go on with my questions, however. Atlas Technical Consultants was hired by the City of Del Mar to review the Layton Consulting geotechnical review. And their report, which was conveyed to the city of Del Mar through our city attorney, is a public document now. And the documents, their recommendations were that the documents from Layton should not be accepted until a slate of questions and missing analyses were addressed. And I want to mention to this board some of them and draw your attention to this 2-page analysis from Atlas. So some of these comments include the consultant, that's Layton, does not discuss geologic hazards, including slope stability and the potential presence of landslides. The sensitive segments of the bluff could be affected by drilling a large number of piers, creating a weakened plane. The consultant, and this will be a question, the consultant does not, Layton does not discuss anticipated subsurface conditions. The consultant does not recommend a minimum horizontal distance to daylight from the proposed western fence alignment post foundations toward the face of nearby slope and bluff. The local geology should be more descriptive and supplemented. The consultant, Layton, should be providing localized geology descriptions and geologic cross sections taken along the bluff top. Layton should provide a narrative regarding lateral support, confinement, and or bearing support of the planned fencing. Layton needs to provide an explicit opinion regarding bluff top stability and the potential for reducing the factor of safety for global and surficial stability of the bluffs where planned improvements will be located and may surcharge the bluffs. Layton provided no corrosion criteria related to ferrous materials and concrete regarding foundations. That should be added. Layton should provide a constructability exercise with equipment and method requirements to reduce the assumptions made. There were a lot of assumptions in their letter that were never chased down. It's my words. Made during initial design and support those conclusions and recommendations with field surveys and geotechnical data. Further, foundation design should also address particular challenging segments of the alignment that have ongoing stability issues, sensitive habitat, or existing improvements. Layton needs to offer foundation design recommendations and provide sufficient engineering guidance to facilitate installation. All surcharges existing and planned should be addressed in the design. Operational and construction vibrations on the planned foundations should be addressed. Bioturbation and biotechnical slope protection should be addressed in the design as well. In short, Atlas Technical Consultants has strongly stated that Layton's documents should not be accepted until these questions, and the questions as laid out in their letter, have been addressed. So my question is, what is the plan to address this?
Thanks for the question. As of this morning, we have not received a document that's not confidential, so we're waiting for the city to provide a non-confidential document. I understand you just indicated it is a public document, so as soon as we receive that, we will review and respond.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. I appreciate that response. The rendering, this is my last question. The renderings showed a tension cable on the top of the 6-foot fence. Is there any guarantee that that will be a tension cable, or is it simply for the renderings? And by the way, we had a chat request to take the slides down so that people can see each other.
To answer your initial question there, Mayor, the final fencing design will be brought back to this board before it's approved. And so again, the current proposed concept as displayed today is what is currently proposed. Again, the board will make the final decision on the detailed fence plan when it's presented to the board.
Okay, my very last question. How is fencing on the upper bluff east of the track necessary for maintenance and operations of the track?
Mayor, as briefed at the start of the presentation, the intent isn't to discuss locations of and decisions made by the working group on where the proposed fencing layout is. And so we recommend that that question be routed back to the working group members to address and provide feedback as needed from that.
Thank you.
Okay, Board Member Jenkins. Anthony, can you stop sharing the slide deck? Thank you.
I just have a couple points to clarify. There has been mention in some of the emails that we received, and I think one of the speakers mentioned it also, about the need to have, that if we had better enforcement, that we wouldn't need to do the fencing. Haven't we increased our enforcement in the past, and has that, in staff's opinion, been successful?
So I will address that. This is Matt. We have, and we received significant back when we were actively enforcing trespassing. We continue to enforce it, but it's not something well received.
Well received by?
The public in the city of Delaware.
Okay. And then there was also comments made several times. I just want to clarify to be certain. Do we have the legal authority to do this fencing?
Well, that is, we believe we do. That's the matter that we were ready to move forward with the Surface Transportation Board to receive actually a declaratory judgment. We believe that we do have that authority to do this already.
And so the Surface Transportation Board is the decision maker there?
So they're a regulatory oversight for this issue, as Nctd is involved, has been determined as a rail common carrier under the interstate commerce.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Edson.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. I have a few questions. Some were asked by others, so please be patient with me as I look through my notes. So my first question is regarding, in slide 1, it talks about the grant and the history. Can you please explain the status of the grant that was awarded in 2018?
I don't have the, I don't have the specific details on it. I know it's TIRCP, and from the time that we are allocated funding is at 3 years to complete the work.
Okay, and I just didn't know if it complied with the December 31st STB stay order, so it extends beyond that point, is what you're telling me. Okay, thank you. And then, as has been addressed by others as well as the speakers, there's conflicting information regarding the impact of the fence post holes to bluff stability. Is that something that we will receive further information on, or is there any interest in doing a third-party geologist to give us some more clarity?
So as I had mentioned in the presentation, Leighton Engineering, who's been the geotech engineer for all of the Delmar Bluff stability projects for the last 20 years, is who performed the original analysis. As I mentioned to Mayor Gasterlin, the document that their outside geotech did and the questions she presented, the information that was provided to us was not confidential, and so we're waiting to receive that information that's marked as a public document, and then we can proceed with a response.
Okay, thank you. And that will be, I'm assuming, sent to us, correct? Distributed. That will be distributed both to the public and to the board?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, it's a little not great sound still. I keep turning it up and down, trying to make it work. So Scott's presentation on map 2 indicated that to me that the lower walking trail would be impacted. Is this trail in the railroad right of way? Sorry if that means pulling something back up to look at.
As he's pulling it back up, I think answer what I think your question is. And so the single strand post and cable would all be within, in fact, all the fencing would be within NCTD right away, but certainly the specifically the single strand posting cable, I think is what you're referring to. And again, that would be intended to be alongside the current trail at that location, except where the trail starts veering up towards track level. And at that point, it would form a U shape to guide people away from coming up the track level.
Okay. And it was mentioned that the 6-foot security fence would have necessarily have some horizontal support bars. How often would it require, would those be required? And also some kind of perpendicular ones?
Mike, I don't know if you can answer that. I don't have those specific details on how what length pattern that we would need those bracings. I don't know if Mike, you can provide some general answer to that. And again, even if Mike is able to provide a general one, the specifics on that would need to be fleshed out in the final design and presented to the board.
Okay, so let me go back to this map too, and thank you for pulling it up. The blue line, which shows the black fence and the walking path seems to cross that fence today. But you're telling me that walking path where it crosses is in Nctd right of way, is that correct?
If you look down actually even below that, you'll see a light black line.
Mm-hmm.
That is the property boundary line. So the blue line is well within Nctd right of way. And again, the purpose of that chain link fence down, or the single strand posted cable down below is to keep people from coming up to track level, which is where the blue fence is on.
And is there an opportunity to create to continue that lower walking path that is outside the line of our fence, in other words, west towards the ocean of that fence, or does the geology preclude that?
The geology and the width of the right-of-way at that area, track level, would preclude that.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Desmond asked my next question. There was a question, or there was a comment regarding an EIR being required. Can that be answered?
No. That's all. With the STV matter, it's all kind of wrapped into that.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all for me. My other questions were asked by others. Thank you. I appreciate the presentations. I appreciate the speakers coming and speaking and talking to us about their concerns. Thanks. Look forward to hearing more from the working group later.
So my question is about this map.
Okay.
Great, thank you, Jewel. The black line that's shown here, I asked this on Monday and I'll ask this again here. The black line shows the boundaries of the right-of-way parcels. And the parcel boundary here is shown on the beach. As far as I know, none of the parcels include beach property. So could you clarify, when I see a discrepancy, it makes me question the, anything computational. When I see a discrepancy, it usually means that there's something driving that discrepancy. And sometimes something driving a discrepancy or an inconsistency, in fact, makes something riddled with errors. This discrepancy makes me doubt all of the renderings. So why is this black property line on the beach?
Just at a high level, and I won't get into specifics again, specifics we would need to deal with through the working group, at a high level, the information that was used to develop these maps was based on GIS technology, which shows the property boundary lines. And again, any specific property location we would need to address through the working group and through future actual survey work as needed for this project.
Okay, Vice Chair Edson, did you have another question?
I do, thank you. So we were shown a number of simulations, and my question is, are you looking for comments back from us for, regarding any of these simulations, or is this just a little bit of an example of, or actually quite a bit of an example of the efforts that have been made to move from the initial proposal to the modified proposals? I don't want to get into the weeds on it if this is something that the working group's tasked with, and I'm happy to be patient for them to come back, because I think that in some, I know that Del Mar, like Solana Beach, my city, we have view assessment for projects. So I know the importance of finding that sweet spot when it comes to the heights of a building or the height of fences in this case. And so I just wondered if you are looking for any type of feedback regarding those specific simulations.
This is an informational item, so we are just working through and sharing the information that we put together.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Again, thanks to everybody. Thanks
Will
to
there be a chance for feedback at some point? Yeah, it seems like timely feedback would be good, but
who's speaking?
this is Terry Gasterland.
Oh, okay. Feedback, I think, is intended to come through the working group, and that's all part of the negotiations related to the issue that Board Member Desmond raised, liability issues. There's a whole host of issues that are wrapped into any conversation about what we've seen today. This is an update, and it was an effort to provide to the public all the information that had been gathered as the result of the investment that Nctd made to help people better understand how this was going to look. And of course, all of this is wrapped up into Nctd operational issues. And so that sort of information you want to make sure gets with your city manager and the working group on the Del Mar side. And from where I sit, we really have struggled with this issue of fencing in the railroad corridor in Encinitas. It's been very challenging. As all of us policymakers know, the built environment we inherited is sometimes very frustrating. And, it makes me wonder, how things would be if the railroadmen from the early part of the 20th century had picked a different route, not put it right on the most beautiful bluffs that we've got in our region, but that's not the way it came out. So here we are struggling with how to address these important issues at this point. And certainly important issues include the concerns that have been raised by all the citizens of Del Mar, and we are indeed sensitive to that. But as a Class 1 railroad, we also have some other obligations, and so we are going to continue with the negotiations through the working group to hopefully come to a resolution of all these very important issues. So with that,
Hey, I have one more question.
Well, we're pretty wrapped up. Is it a quick question?
It's a short, tiny question. So
okay.
When will board members of Nctd have the opportunity to give public discussion and feedback on this?
Well,
and
I
to
think
really
that
talk about it?
we just went through that. This is all part of the working group, and there's some really important work being done by the working group, which includes the California Coastal Commission, the City of Del Mar, and the North County Transit District. And so once that work is done, once we get to the point where there's either an agreement or not an agreement, we will get back to the full board and Les Del Mar.
I will point out that working group contains staff only. It doesn't contain council members. It doesn't contain board members. And it would be terrific to have an opportunity for us to be able to talk.
Well, there will be a point at which we will get the presentations in closed session, would be my guess. So stand by for those opportunities. This was intended to provide the results of the simulations And so once the working group gets to the point where it's necessary to speak with the elected officials of each jurisdiction, then that will come up next. So for now, we are wrapped up on this particular item, and we will move on now to the executive director's report. Mr. Tucker, do you have anything?
I do have a couple of things that I want to share. I'm going to try to go through them quickly. This weekend, we will be offering special coaster service to accommodate participants in the Rock and Roll Marathon, which is expected to draw as many as 18,000 runners to San Diego. The coaster train will depart Oceanside at 4 a.m. on Sunday, October 24, and stop at all coaster stations, reaching Seneca Depot downtown at 5 a.m. The schedule is available on our website. Again, riders are encouraged to download the Pronto app to buy coaster tickets in advance. The next item that I do want to mention is the expanded coaster schedule starts October 25th. The added schedule includes increasing the number of weekday trips to 32 and weekend trips to 20. Trips have been added to the Sereno Valley Coaster Connection service to accommodate riders during peak commuter hours. Additional breeze trips are also in place at the Point Failure Station as a pilot program to connect with coaster during weekday peak hours. We are also hosting a press event to celebrate the launch of the increased coaster service. It will be on Tuesday, October 26th at 8 a.m. at Santa Fe Depot in San Diego. Speakers will include Chair Krantz, San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria, Sandag Chair Blakespeare, and others. All board members are invited to attend, and invite with the details will be emailed to you. I am pleased to announce that we will be holding our Holiday Express train this December. Historically, this event has drawn as many as 9,000 riders. The Holiday Express was virtual last year, so we're very happy to be doing this event in person this year with the appropriate precautions. The Holiday Express train will run December, write it down, December 4th, 5th, 11th, and 12th. More details will be announced soon. Just as information on this one, this sells out rapidly on an annual basis, so typically within the first 24 hours, it's all sold out. So if you intend to do that, be there and be ready. That concludes my report, Chair.
Okay, very good. Moving on to board member reports, comments, and correspondence. Any board members have anything they would like to report? I see no hands up. So, Anthony, do we have any remaining public comments?
We do not, sir.
Okay, so that we will move to adjournment. The next scheduled meetings are of the PAF committee on November 2nd, 2021 at 1 p.m. And then we will have our regular board meeting next on November 18th, 2021 at 2 p.m. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.